But first, we are coming to you live, as I said tonight, from Grand Isle, Louisiana. Just one location amid the 140 miles of Louisiana shoreline that have been hit by oil from the blown-out well in the Gulf of Mexico. We were out in that oil earlier today, out in the bay and on the beaches. Tonight, other states are preparing themselves for a similar scene. Coastal communities along Alabama and Mississippi and Florida now watching that oil in the Gulf surging toward them as well. What you're looking at here is the preparation that's happening in those communities to try to keep as much oil off their coasts as possible. It looks a lot like the preparations that we've been seeing here in Louisiana. And if you're looking at these preparations and thinking, neat, but looks a little pitiful, then you share my impression. That's what it feels like looking at this on tape. That's what it feels like being out in it, too. BP's CEO, Tony Hayward, has just done a remarkable interview with the Financial Times newspaper about whether or not his company and the oil industry in general ever put much thought into how to deal with a crisis like this. The short answer is no. The industry put a lot of thought into creating the conditions that could cause a crisis like this, but not much thought at all into how to deal with that crisis once it happened. Mr. Hayward telling the Financial Times, quote, "What is undoubtedly true is that we did not have the tools you would want in your toolkit." Hayward accepted it was, quote, "an entirely fair criticism to say the company had not been fully prepared for a deep water oil leak." So even though BP was granted permission by the U.S. government to drill this well, the CEO of that company now acknowledges they weren't prepared to respond to a leak at that well that they drilled. Mr. Hayward went on to explain, quote, after the Exxon Valdez spill in 1989, the industry created the Marine Spill Response Corporation to contain oil on the surface of the water. The issue now will be to create the same subsea response capability. Think about that for a second. In 1989, after the Exxon Valdez, the oil industry started working on how to clean oil off the surface of the water. The head of BP says maybe now, in 2010, the industry should think about starting to work on how to deal with oil leaking underwater. What's been going on between 1989 and now? Well, the industry has been setting record after record for drilling oil in deeper and deeper and deeper water, bragging about it all the way. Back in 1989, the deepest that they'd ever drilled was less than 1,800 feet. Now it's over 10,000 feet. Here's Transocean bragging in 2003 of setting a, quote, new world water depth drilling record by spudding a well in 10,011 feet of water in the U.S. Gulf of Mexico. The previous world water depth drilling record was 9,727 feet of water. Here's a 2008 Shell Oil press release. Quote, Shell Oil Company has set a world water depth record in drilling and completing a subsea well 9,356 feet below the water's surface. Woo! We did it! We're awesome! The achievements that the oil industry has been bragging about since 1989 and trading on since 1989 and selling to their potential investors ever since the Exxon Valdez, they have to do with their ability to drill deeper, to drill miles and miles beneath the surface of the ocean. They have spent a lot of time bragging about that and a lot of time counting their money. Here are the top 5 most profitable companies in the world last year. Notice something that connects them? All 5 of them are oil and gas companies, every single one of them, including BP, which comes in at number 5, as you can see there. Over the past couple of decades, as the oil industry has made the kind of profit that turns saints into sinners and sinners into kings, that industry has made an overt choice. They have chosen to spend their hand-over-fist money on learning how to drill more, how to drill deeper. They could have spent those resources, some of them maybe, on developing new cleanup technology, new containment technology for spills, but they didn't. They can say they did if they want to, but who cares what they say at this point? It's clear that they didn't. If they had done it, the response out here to this spill would not be so pitiful. Booms that do not work and aren't put out right. Bamboo pickets to hold the boom in place that doesn't hold the boom in place at the first sign of a slight wind. Diversion barriers that don't divert the oil, not really. Nothing but denial to even approach dealing with the undersea crude plumes. Workers shoveling and raking oil off beaches, standing in the same spot, shoveling and raking all day long for 12 hours without moving because you shovel it away and then you wait a minute and then you shovel again and hey, look, it's still there. Looking at the technology that we've got to deal with the oil that's already leaked, it's like I felt today when we were driving around and we were talking to people, we were out in the oil, I felt like it was watching real humans trying to act out the plot from a MacGyver episode in real life. You know how MacGyver would make like a nuclear bomb with a matchstick and a piece of his own hair and some silly putty? Workers here are trying to achieve something that difficult with means that humble. And the problem is that none of us really is MacGyver, and none of it works. There's nothing romantic about the stuff that we saw here today. It is disgusting. And the response effort is inadequate. It is pitiful. And the reason the response is so pitiful is because the people who make messes like this have apparently put no thought into how to clean up messes like this in decades. And they've gotten away with it. In 1989, the thing that led the oil industry to create the Marine Spill Response Corporation was the Exxon Valdez spill in Alaska. It was the sort of thing that everybody thought at the time maybe could even put Exxon out of business. But by the time the Supreme Court got around to lowering the damages Exxon was due to pay, nearly 20 years later, in 2008, Exxon was the most profitable corporation the universe has ever known, posting the highest profits ever recorded by any company of any kind in any country ever. Exxon Valdez did not take down Exxon, and Deepwater Horizon, in all likelihood, is not going to take down BP. Nothing, no level of disaster has ever caused this industry to pay significant mind toward safety, particularly toward the safety of areas affected by oil that they spill, the result of which we're seeing right now in the Gulf. Is any of that going to ever change? Could this disaster change it? Joining us now are the co-chairs of President Obama's new Oil Spill Commission, which was established to examine why this spill happened and what reforms are needed to prevent something like it from ever happening again. That commission is chaired by former Democratic Senator Bob Graham of Florida and William Riley, the former EPA administrator under the first President Bush. Senator Graham, Administrator Riley, thank you both so much for making time for us tonight.
Fine. Thank you, Rachel.
Good to be with you.
Senator, thank you. Senator Graham, I'll ask you first. I know you've just been tasked with looking into this disaster, but based on what you've seen with this industry, what you know about it thus far, how can the country be approving drilling when the companies don't know how to clean it up if something goes wrong at the depths at which we are approving them to drill?
Rachel, you're absolutely right, and that is one of the many questions that we're going to be asking. I can tell you that Bill and I are committed to doing a thorough diagnosis of what's happened, both before the explosion, after the explosion. We also are going to be making some tough recommendations to the President, the American people, as to what we can do to give the American people the confidence that we are going to learn this lesson and not repeat it.
Administrator Riley, I know that you were EPA director when the Exxon Valdez ran aground in Prince William Sound in 1989. What major advancements in safety and cleanup technology have oil companies made over the last 20 or 30 years? Are there any real major advancements? This feels like real old-fashioned technology out here.
You know, you put your finger on it in your opening remarks. The extraordinary success of this industry in developing technology to go deeper and deeper into the sea, to put down a well, a central well, and then to go out in all directions to get the product up is breathtaking. And the condition, as nearly as I can tell from looking at the photographs in the movies from what's happening in the Gulf, is that the response technology is about as primitive as it was in the Exxon Valdez case. That is, the skimmers that are dysfunctional in the open ocean, the booms that break, as you say, with the slightest wave action, dispersants that are not ready for prime time, that may or may not be toxic, something that has to be determined in the event, which seems to me ought to have been anticipated, with impacts on fish that really need to be very carefully acknowledged and may or may not have been. I would say that it's really scandalous that the response capability, even on the surface, not just the subsurface, where we have admittedly a case of virtually nothing to work effectively, is really going to be a prime focus of our review, and has got to be a major priority of the Commission.
Do you believe that the government has the power to force, essentially, the industry to develop better capacity in that regard?
Yes, I think the government has the power. It's a question of how you create the right regulatory incentives and have a regulatory apparatus that is serious that monitors, that engages, that doesn't just provide a blank check for new development. Admittedly, nobody thought this kind of thing could happen because it hadn't happened before. But it did happen. And it doesn't seem unreasonable, especially since there were response plans prepared by the company that did, at least in theory, contemplate a serious spill, that we weren't better prepared for it.
Of course, things like this have happened before. They've just never happened at this depth. Part of the problem with the part of the problem with the company telling us with all of their techniques has never been tried before at 5,000 feet. Senator Graham, President Obama is promising to triple the manpower down here. That was the last promise that he made here in terms of just human resources. I was out today. I saw a lot of boom out here that was just a mess, not very effective, not being monitored, not being set back up